The day my parents handed my brother $60,000 for a house, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You'll have to rent somewhere." I thought she was joking. Then my father added, "Your brother needs the help more than you do." I smiled, nodded, and walked out. They had no idea what I was about to buy. My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I had been the daughter who was expected to understand. My younger brother, Ryan, was the one everyone worried about. He was 30, charming, confident, and somehow always had a new problem. When his car broke down, Dad paid for repairs. When his business failed, Mom covered his bills. When he needed money for a new idea, my parents called it an investment. I was different. I worked as a dental office manager, paid my own bills, and had been saving for a home since I was 24. I wasn't rich. I simply learned early that if I wanted something, I had to work for it. For years, I kept a separate savings account. Every paycheck, I transferred money into it. I skipped expensive vacations. I drove an old car. I cooked at home. And whenever my friends asked why I was so careful with money, I always gave the same answer. Because someday, I want a place of my own. My parents knew that. That's why what happened next hurt so much. One Saturday afternoon, I went to my parents' house for lunch. Ryan was already there. He looked unusually excited. Dad poured himself coffee and smiled. "We have some good news." I assumed they were talking about Ryan's new job. Instead, Mom turned toward him. "We've decided to give Ryan $60,000 toward a house." I nearly dropped my fork. $60,000? Ryan grinned. "Yeah, pretty amazing, right?" I looked at my parents. "You're giving him $60,000. Dad nodded. "He's ready to settle down." I swallowed. "That's great for him." Mom smiled. "And you'll understand why we can't help you right now." I stared at her. "Help me with what?" She looked confused. "Your house." I laughed softly. "I never asked you for money." Dad leaned back. "Exactly, that's why we know you'll manage." Then Mom said the words I would never forget. "You can rent somewhere for a few years." I sat completely still. Rent somewhere. After years of saving. After watching my brother receive tens of thousands of dollars, simply because my parents decided he needed it. I looked at Ryan. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. I forced a smile. "Congratulations." Mom reached across the table. "You're not angry, are you?" I shook my head. "No." That was a lie. I was furious. But I had learned something important that afternoon. Sometimes people don't realize they're hurting you because they've never had to worry about losing you. I left without arguing. When I got into my car, I cried. Not because I wanted their money. Because I wanted to know why my hard work always seemed less valuable than Ryan's mistakes. That night, I opened my savings account. I had $86,400. For the first time, I stopped thinking about what my parents would do. I started thinking about what I would do. The next morning, I called a realtor. Her name was Megan. I told her exactly what I wanted. A small house, safe neighborhood, nothing fancy, I don't care if it needs work. She laughed. "I like your attitude." 3 weeks later, she showed me a small blue house at the end of a quiet street. It needed paint. The kitchen was outdated. The backyard was overgrown. But there was something about it. I walked into the living room and immediately knew. "This is it." Megan smiled. "You're sure?" I nodded. For the first time in a long time. I made an offer. It was accepted. I used most of my savings for the down payment and kept enough for emergencies. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't even post about it online. I simply signed the papers and became a homeowner. I thought keeping quiet would give me peace. I was wrong. 2 weeks before closing, my mother called. "Emily, Ryan found a house." I smiled. "That's wonderful. He needs another $10,000 for closing costs." I almost laughed. I'm sure you'll figure it out. There was silence. Then she asked, "Why do you sound strange?" "I'm just busy." "With what?" I looked around my empty new house. "Work." I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. But then Ryan made the mistake that changed everything. He called me one evening. "You know, Mom says you're upset about the money." "I'm not upset." "Good." He laughed. "Because honestly, you don't need help." I said nothing. He continued, "You're good with money. I'll probably always need more than you." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel. Because it was honest. He truly believed I would always be the responsible one who could take care of herself, while he was entitled to everyone else's support. Then he added something that made my blood run cold. "By the way, Mom and Dad might sell their house soon." I frowned. "Why?" "They're thinking of moving closer to me." I suddenly understood. They weren't just giving Ryan $60,000. They were building a financial plan around him. Their retirement. Their house. Their savings. Everything seemed to revolve around Ryan. I hung up and decided I was done expecting fairness from people who didn't believe fairness was necessary. A month later, my house was finally ready. I moved in quietly. No party. No announcement. Just me, a few boxes, and the feeling that I had finally done something entirely for myself. Then came the unexpected knock. My parents were standing at my door. My mother looked shocked. My father looked angry. Mom stared past me into the living room. "You bought a house." I nodded. "Yes." She looked at Dad. Then back at me. "How?" "With my savings." Dad frowned. "You said you couldn't afford one." "I never said that." Mom's face tightened. "You should have told us." I almost smiled. "Why?" She didn't answer. Then Dad said, "Because we could have helped you make a better decision." I looked around my house. This was my decision. Mom stepped inside. "You spent all that money instead of asking us." I couldn't believe it. "You gave Ryan $60,000. He needed it. I needed independence." Dad shook his head. "You're being emotional." "No," I said quietly. "For once, I'm being practical." Then Ryan arrived. He had apparently come over to my parents' house and followed them. When he saw my home, his face changed. "You actually bought one." "Yes." He walked around silently. Then he noticed the backyard. "This place is bigger than mine." I stared at him. "You have a house." He shrugged. "Yeah, but Mom and Dad paid for half of it." That sentence finally broke whatever patience I had left. I looked at all three of them. "You know what hurts?" Nobody answered. "I never wanted your money." I pointed toward the house. "I wanted you to believe I deserved the same support you gave him." My mother began crying. But I wasn't finished. "For years, every time Ryan failed, you called it a setback." I looked at my brother. "Every time I succeeded, you called it something I was supposed to do." Silence. Then Dad said something I never expected. "We thought you didn't need us." I stared at him. "That doesn't mean I didn't need you." Those words changed the room. Mom sat down. She looked at the floor. Then she whispered, "We were afraid Ryan would never make it without us." I nodded slowly. "And you were afraid I would make it without you." Nobody spoke. That was the truth. They had mistaken independence for not needing love. A few weeks later, something even more surprising happened. Ryan called me. I almost didn't answer. When I did, he sounded different. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Are you actually happy with the house?" I smiled. "Yes." There was a long pause. "I'm not." I was surprised. He told me the house my parents helped him buy had turned into a financial nightmare. The mortgage was too high. The neighborhood wasn't what he expected. And his business was struggling again. For the first time, he didn't ask me for money. He asked me for advice. I helped him create a budget. Not because I owed him. Because I wanted to. But I made one thing clear. I'll help you learn, I won't pay your bills. He agreed. That was the first healthy conversation we'd ever had. Months passed. My parents eventually stopped comparing us. Ryan started working steadily and sold the expensive house. He rented a smaller place and began rebuilding his finances himself. And my relationship with my parents slowly changed too. They didn't suddenly become perfect, but they started asking instead of assuming. One evening, Mom visited me. We sat on the porch while the sun went down. She looked around and smiled. "It's a beautiful home." I smiled. "Thank you." Then she said, "I wish we'd celebrated you more." I looked at her. "So do I." She reached for my hand. I was wrong. For years, I had imagined what I would say if she ever apologized. But when the moment finally came, I didn't need a speech. I simply squeezed her hand. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't revenge. It's knowing you no longer need someone's approval to feel worthy. My parents gave my brother $60,000 because they believed he needed it more. They told me to rent somewhere because they believed I could handle life alone. And maybe they were right about one thing. I could handle it. But what they didn't understand was that buying my house wasn't about proving I was better than Ryan. It wasn't about beating my parents. It was about finally proving something to myself. I could build a life without waiting for anyone to choose me. The house wasn't huge. It wasn't luxurious. But every wall carried a piece of my hard work. Every payment reminded me that I had done it myself. And every time I turned the key in the front door, I remembered that Saturday afternoon when my mother told me to rent somewhere. She thought she was telling me what I couldn't have. She didn't realize she was giving me the final push I needed to go out and get it myself. Sometimes rejection doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it forces you to discover how strong you really are. And sometimes the best answer to being told you're not worth investing in is quietly building something no one can take away from you.